In the vast tapestry of history, there are stories so astonishing that they seem almost impossible. Yet every detail is real. Today, you are about to step into one such story, a chain of events stretching across continents and centuries, binding together forgotten explorers, hidden letters, secret alliances, daring escapes, and lives forever altered by the quiet decisions of people history nearly forgot. What follows is a journey built from documented events, eyewitness records, and historical archives, woven into a narrative crafted to feel as gripping as a cinematic epic. From the wind-swept shores of the early American colonies to the coded correspondence of wartime Europe, from the dusty trade routes of the Ottoman Empire to the birth of a modern nation, you are about to travel through time. And now, the story begins. Chapter 1. The Letter That Should Not Have Survived. The year was 1774. Winter had been cruel to the colonies, the kind of winter that carved its name into memory. In a cramped print shop on Milk Street, a young apprentice named Elias Mercer wiped ink-stained fingers against his apron and leaned closer to the candlelit table. He wasn't supposed to open the letter. It had arrived hours earlier, hand-delivered by a courier who refused to give his name. The envelope bore no seal, only a hastily scrawled instruction delivered to Jonathan Brace immediately. Brace, the print shop's owner, had left on business just days before, riding south toward Philadelphia. Elias had been told explicitly to store any mail untouched until Brace returned. But the letter seemed to hum with urgency. Outside, the sounds of unrest swelled, the clash of British boots on cobblestone, the shouts of protesters, the barked orders of soldiers sent to calm a city that no longer wished to be calm. Rumors swirled faster than the winter wind. More taxes, more troops, more punishment for the Boston Tea Party. Elias knew he shouldn't break the rules, but he also knew something else. Jonathan Brace was no ordinary printer. Brace's shop printed pamphlets that stirred the colonies. Text disguised as simple essays, but filled with coded phrases meant for the Sons of Liberty. And letters like this one, unmarked, secretive, were rarely friendly correspondence. A sharp knock at the door jolted him upright. Elias's heart hammered. At this hour, only the British would knock that way. He snatched up the letter, slipped it beneath a stack of paper, and crossed the narrow shop floor. The knocking came again, harder this time. "Open, by order of His Majesty's forces," a voice barked. Elias hesitated only a second before sliding the heavy bolt. Two redcoats stepped inside, snow crusted on their boots, muskets slung across their backs. Behind them, a third soldier entered, a lieutenant, with sharp eyes and a sneer that suggested he enjoyed frightening boys like Elias. "We're searching for seditious materials. This shop is known for printing unhelpful documents." Elias swallowed. "We print only what is lawful, sir." The lieutenant walked slowly across the room, gloved fingers brushing across wooden type drawers, paper stacks, ink pots. Then he laid his hand on the very stack hiding the letter. "This seems recently disturbed." Elias forced a laugh. "Ink deliveries earlier, sir. I had to move things around." The lieutenant studied him for a moment. Then, with a sudden motion, he lifted the stack, and the hidden envelope fluttered to the ground. Elias froze. The lieutenant bent down, picked it up, and turned it over in his hand. No seal, no sender. Curious. His thumb slipped beneath the flap. Elias's breath caught. But a shout from outside broke the tension. A crowd surged past the window. Angry colonists hurling snowballs, British officers shouting, horses rearing. The lieutenant snapped his head toward the noise. "Enough for tonight," he muttered, tossing the letter back to the table. "We'll return." And just like that, the soldiers left. Elias rushed to the door, slammed the bolt, and pressed his forehead against the wood, breathing hard. When he turned back to the table, the letter seemed even more dangerous. With trembling fingers, he opened it. Inside were just 7 words, scrawled in haste. "The cargo arrives early. Stop the watch." Elias stared at the words, bewildered. What cargo? What watch? Why had someone risked everything to deliver this message? He didn't know it yet, but this message would change the course of his life, tie him to a conspiracy stretching from Boston to London to the courts of Europe, and embroil him in a secret history scholars would still debate centuries later. And it all began with a letter that should not have survived.
Chapter 2. Shadows over the harbor. Boston Harbor lay under a thin veil of mist, soft, ghost-like tendrils rising from the black water as dawn broke. Elias Mercer hurried along the wharf, his cloak pulled tight against the cold. The letter was tucked safely inside his pocket, the words burning in his mind. The cargo arrives early. Stop the watch. He didn't understand the message, but he knew someone would. There was only one person Elias trusted enough to ask, Samuel Avery, a cooper by trade, and in quiet corners of the city, a known sympathizer of the Sons of Liberty. Elias spotted Avery's workshop perched at the far end of the wharf. Barrels of all sizes lined the exterior, some filled with salt fish, others bound for merchant ships. Avery himself was outside, hammer in hand, tightening iron hoops around a barrel. "You're out early," he said without looking up. "I need your help," Elias whispered, glancing around to make sure no soldiers lingered. At that, Avery raised his head. His eyes sharpened. "Inside," he muttered. The workshop smelled of pine resin and damp wood. A single lantern illuminated the scattered tools and half-finished barrels. Avery shut the door behind them. "Well?" he asked. Elias pulled out the letter. Avery's brow furrowed as he read it. Then he read it again. "Where did you get this?" "Delivered to the shop last night, addressed to Jonathan Brace." Avery let out a low whistle. "Brace has friends in dangerous places. This message, it's not good. What does it mean?" He hesitated. "The cargo, that's a code the Sons of Liberty use for incoming shipments meant to avoid Crown oversight. Could be arms, powder, documents, anything. And stop the watch." He paused, voice dropping further. "Means the British patrols are being bribed or delayed so the cargo can slip past unseen. But if someone sent this early..." A sharp knock on the door cut him off. Avery's eyes widened. He snuffed the lantern. "Stay quiet," he whispered. They crept to the window. Outside stood a single man, cloaked, his back to the door. Avery relaxed slightly. "That's William Dunn. He's one of ours." Avery unbolted the door. "What's wrong?" he asked as Dunn slipped inside. Dunn's face was pale. "Everything. They raided 2 safe houses last night, arrested 4 men. Someone's leaking information to the British." Elias tensed. Dunn continued, "And there's more. The shipment meant for next week, it's already in the harbor, early. No explanation." Avery exchanged a look with Elias. "The letter," Avery handed over. Dunn read it and swore under his breath. "This changes everything. If the British learn what's in that cargo, the entire network collapses." Elias finally asked, "What's in it?" Dunn exhaled slowly. "Proof." "Proof of what?" "That the Crown has been intercepting colonial correspondence for years, reading private letters, altering them, even forging some to create distrust between the colonies. A full dossier, names, dates, stamps from London. We risked everything to obtain it." Elias's pulse quickened. "A conspiracy at the highest level. And if the dossier reaches Philadelphia, it could unify the colonies faster than any tax or outrage. But if the British seize it..." He didn't finish. Avery turned to Elias. "You said soldiers searched the print shop?" Elias nodded. "Then your employer is tied deeper to this than we thought. Brace must have been meant to receive the order to move the shipment." Dunn straightened up. "Jonathan Brace is missing," he said quietly. "He never reached Philadelphia." Elias felt the room tilt. "Missing?" he repeated. "There are whispers he was taken, or worse." Silence pressed in. Finally, Avery spoke. "We need to act. If the cargo arrived early, the British may already know something is coming." Dunn nodded. "We're gathering a team to retrieve the dossier before nightfall, but we need someone who can move through the city without suspicion." His eyes drifted to Elias. The apprentice stiffened. "Me? I'm no spy." "You're exactly what they won't expect," Dunn said. "A printer's boy, harmless, invisible, and Jonathan Brace trusted you enough to handle his shop. That matters." Avery put a hand on Elias's shoulder. "You opened the letter for a reason. Perhaps your life is already tangled in this." Elias looked from Avery to Dunn. Outside, the harbor fog thickened, rolling like a curtain over the city. He swallowed hard. "What do you need me to do?" Dunn smiled, not with warmth, but with relief. "Go to Griffin's Wharf. Find a man named Silas Cray. Tell him the watch must be stopped." Elias nodded, heart pounding. "Then what?" he asked. "Then," Dunn said, "history begins."
Chapter 3. Midnight at Griffin's Wharf. The harbor was a maze of wooden piers, stacked crates, and moored ships creaking under the weight of winter's cold. Elias Mercer moved quietly, boots sinking into icy puddles, eyes scanning every shadow. The letter's words burned in his pocket, a secret tether pulling him into the night. Griffin's Wharf was rarely busy after sundown. Tonight, however, the faint sound of hushed voices echoed off the warehouses. Elias slowed, recognizing the distinctive rhythm of someone tapping a code on a barrel, a method the Sons of Liberty had perfected for discreet communication. "Who goes there?" a deep voice called. Elias stepped forward, showing only a sliver of his face. "I bring a message. Stop the watch." The man emerged from the shadows, tall, lean, with a scarf covering his mouth. His eyes sparkled with alert intelligence. "Silas Cray, you're late." "I had to make sure the letter got to the right hands," Elias replied. Cray studied him for a moment, then motioned toward a cluster of barrels behind the main dock. Inside the hollowed barrels were bundles of cloth and hidden compartments containing secret papers. Cray pulled a small waterproof satchel from one of the barrels. "Open this," he instructed. Elias obeyed. Inside was a set of delicate instruments, a small chronometer, a series of coded papers, and a lead-sealed tube labeled in faint, cryptic letters. "The British patrol schedule," Cray explained. "We've been watching them for months, every hour, every change in rotation. The watch must be stopped if the cargo is to move undetected." Elias nodded, realizing the full magnitude of his task. He was no longer a simple apprentice. He was a link in a chain that could alter the course of the colony's struggle for freedom. Cray handed him the chronometer. "Time it precisely. If the guards notice the slightest irregularity, they'll swarm the dock. You only get one chance." A distant bell tolled, signaling midnight. Elias's fingers tightened around the instruments. He felt the weight of history pressing down on him, yet he knew he could not hesitate. One wrong move would mean the capture of the precious dossier and perhaps the end of the secret network itself. He took a deep breath, adjusting the hood of his cloak, and stepped toward the shadowed edge of the wharf. Each step brought him closer to the unknown, an underground world of spies, smugglers, and patriots whose courage would remain unrecorded in official histories. The first guards appeared at the far end of the pier, unaware of the young apprentice moving silently between barrels. Elias synchronized the chronometer, watching the minutes tick down, knowing that the timing of the watch's disruption was everything. A single mistake, a stumble,
a dropped tool. Anything could alert the British. Yet with each step he felt a strange clarity, a purpose that had crystallized in the darkness. He was carrying not just a message, but a testament to the courage and cunning of those willing to defy the Empire. And as the clock struck 12, Elias signaled to Cray. The night seemed to hold its breath. A series of small, controlled explosions, designed not to harm, but to distract, rocked the far end of the dock. Guards ran toward the source, leaving the wharf momentarily unguarded. Elias moved quickly, slipping through the gap and reaching the crates that held the cargo. His hands worked swiftly, securing the dossier, checking the seals, and confirming the coded papers matched those in the lead tube. Suddenly, a shadow fell over him. Elias froze. A British officer stepped forward, lantern in hand, his expression suspicious. "And what do we have here?" he demanded. Elias swallowed hard, glancing around for an escape route. The tide had turned, and now his ingenuity and courage would be tested to the limit. He remembered the words Jonathan Brace had once said, "Sometimes history chooses the most unlikely heroes." And in that moment, Elias Mercer was ready to be one.
Chapter 4. The Narrow Escape. Elias's heart hammered in his chest as the British officer approached, lantern casting long, sinister shadows across the dock. Every instinct screamed for him to run, yet the dossier weighed heavily against his chest, a tangible reminder of what was at stake. The officer's eyes narrowed. "Step aside, boy! What are you doing here?" Elias forced a calmness he didn't feel. I'm just checking the barrels for damage, sir. A storm came through earlier." The officer's gaze swept over the crates, pausing for a fraction longer than Elias dared hope. Then, a sudden shout from the far side of the wharf, Cray's signal, drew the officer's attention. Elias seized the moment. With the agility of someone half his age, he darted toward a stack of barrels, diving behind them. The officer spun back, lantern swinging, but the shadows swallowed Elias. He could hear Cray cursing in the distance as the distraction worked perfectly. Footsteps, voices, and the creak of ropes filled the air. Elias crawled toward the edge of the dock, gripping the side. The tide was high, but the cold water offered a risky escape route. A calculated plunge into the icy harbor was his only option. He dove. The shock of the freezing water stole his breath, but he surfaced quickly, gasping. Below, he could see the dim lights of small rowboats tethered to the piers. One of them, already manned by Cray, was drifting silently toward him. "Over here, Cray," hissed, holding a rope. Elias swam, lungs burning, toward the boat. Hands gripped his arms, pulling him aboard. Wet, shivering, but alive, he collapsed into the bottom of the craft. Cray didn't speak. He merely rowed, each stroke taking them further from the dock, further from the prying eyes of the Empire. The city lights blurred into streaks, reflecting the chaos of the night. Elias finally managed a shiver-filled laugh. We did it!" Cray's smile was fleeting. Not yet. The dossier must reach Philadelphia. Only there can it be used to unite the colonies. They rowed silently through the early morning mist, passing merchant ships unaware of the secret cargo being ferried under the noses of the Empire. Each splash of the oars sounded like a heartbeat, marking the rhythm of their flight and the stakes of their mission. By dawn, the silhouette of a secluded cove appeared, a safe house known only to a trusted few. Cray helped Elias onto the shore, where they were greeted by a small group of loyalists who had been waiting with a fresh set of dry clothes and provisions. Elias changed quickly, wrapping himself in a thick cloak. His fingers still trembled from the cold, but the adrenaline that had propelled him through the night lingered, leaving him alert, almost wired. One of the men handed him a mug of strong, bitter tea. Elias drank greedily. "Tomorrow," Cray said, eyes fixed on the horizon, "we begin the journey to Philadelphia. But tonight, remember this. You've stepped into a larger world, one where every choice echoes through history. The cargo is safe for now, but the real danger is only beginning." Elias nodded, staring at the first light of the sun breaking through the fog. He realized that the ordinary life he had known, the life of an apprentice, of a boy who knew little beyond ink and paper, was over. In its place, a life of peril, intrigue, and courage awaited him. And somewhere, far across the ocean, the forces of the British Empire were already plotting their next move, unaware that the tide of history was slowly beginning to turn.
Chapter 5. Arrival in Philadelphia. The journey to Philadelphia was long and arduous. Elias and Cray traveled mostly by night, taking hidden paths and avoiding major roads where British patrols were known to roam. By day, they rested in remote farmhouses, always careful to maintain their cover. Elias quickly learned to read the subtle signs of danger: a shutter slightly ajar, an unusually quiet farmyard, the glint of metal in the distance. Every shadow became a potential threat, and every stranger a possible ally or enemy. After several days, the city's familiar skyline finally appeared in the distance. The towering spire of Christ Church punctuated the early morning mist. Philadelphia was alive with the bustle of merchants, farmers, and politicians, but beneath its surface, the tension of revolution hummed quietly. Cray led Elias to a discreet townhouse on a narrow street near the Delaware River. Inside, the safe house was stocked with maps, letters, and a small arsenal of weapons hidden behind false walls. Here they would meet the others responsible for moving the dossier to key revolutionary leaders. As Elias stepped inside, he felt the weight of responsibility settle upon him more heavily than ever. This was no longer a simple courier mission. He was now a participant in a struggle that would shape a nation. A woman emerged from the shadows, her hair tied back and eyes sharp with intelligence. "You must be Elias," she said. "I'm Abigail Thorne. I've been expecting you." "Expecting me?" Elias repeated, bewildered. "Yes," she said, producing a small parchment. "Brace himself entrusted you with the dossier. You've already passed the first test. Now comes the second, ensuring it reaches the Continental Congress without interception." Abigail unfurled a map on the table. Pins and threads marked various safe routes, hidden river crossings, and houses known to be loyal to the revolutionary cause. Elias traced the path with his finger, feeling the enormity of what lay ahead. "You'll be moving with a small group," Abigail continued. "The British have spies in the city, and any misstep could mean capture or worse." Cray nodded, placing a hand on Elias's shoulder. "You've proven yourself already. The dossier is vital, but your safety is important too. We'll watch each other's backs." Elias felt a mixture of fear and resolve. The city was a labyrinth of opportunity and danger, and every decision could alter the course of history. Outside, the streets of Philadelphia bustled, unaware of the secret operation unfolding within the safe house walls. That night, as they prepared the next leg of the journey, Elias couldn't help but think of Boston, of the icy harbor, of the narrow escape that had thrust him into this hidden war. Every step he took now was fraught with peril, but also with purpose. And somewhere in the shadows of the British Empire, agents were moving as well, seeking to uncover every secret the colonies held. Elias realized that the stakes were higher than ever, and the game of espionage, politics, and courage had only just begun.
The Continental Congress. The safe house was a hive of quiet activity as dawn broke over Philadelphia. Elias and the group prepared to move the dossier to a secure location within the heart of the city. Every step was planned with precision. Every door, alleyway, and shadow had been accounted for. Abigail Thorne led the group through a series of narrow streets, finally reaching a modest building near Independence Hall. Here, members of the Continental Congress met in secrecy, planning their strategies against the British Crown. Only a select few knew of the dossier's existence and its potential to change the course of the revolution. Elias clutched the package tightly. Every muscle in his body was tense. The streets around him buzzed with merchants, soldiers, and unsuspecting citizens, unaware that history was being carried in a small, waterproof satchel. Inside the building, they were greeted by a group of men whose faces were already familiar from political pamphlets and correspondence. Samuel Adams, John Dickinson, and Thomas Mifflin. Each man moved with urgency, yet with the gravitas of those who understood the weight of their responsibility. Abigail stepped forward. "Gentlemen, the dossier has arrived." Elias carefully placed the satchel on the table. The room went silent as one of the men unsealed it, revealing meticulously detailed records of British interception and forgery, complete with original letters, stamps, and corroborating documents. Each piece was a damning indictment of Crown activities against the colonies. Samuel Adams ran his fingers over the papers. This is undeniable proof. With this, we can show every colony how deeply they have been deceived. John Dickinson leaned in, eyes scanning the documents. And if the British were to intercept these papers now? He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Then everything Elias risked would be for naught, which is why we must ensure no one leaves this room until plans are secure. Elias felt a swell of pride and fear. He had been a simple apprentice, yet now the future of the colonies rested in part on his courage and discretion. The men began to strategize. Plans were drafted to disseminate the information carefully, to protect key revolutionaries, and to ensure the British could not trace the leak back to the Sons of Liberty network. The air was thick with tension and purpose. As the day progressed, Elias realized that this was just the beginning. The dossier would ignite debates, secure alliances, and inevitably provoke retaliation. He had entered a world where intelligence and courage intertwined, and where each small decision could ripple through the colonies, shaping history in ways yet unseen. For Elias, the events of the past weeks were the prelude. Ahead lay a larger battle, not fought with muskets alone, but with minds, strategy, and the unbreakable spirit of those who sought freedom.
Whispers and shadows. The news of the dossier spread cautiously, whispered in private rooms and carried by trusted couriers to the leaders of neighboring colonies. Each message was encoded, each meeting shrouded in secrecy. The Sons of Liberty had worked tirelessly to ensure the information reached the right hands without alerting British eyes and ears. Elias watched from a quiet corner of the safe house as men and women moved with purpose, carrying papers, maps, and letters to hidden couriers. The city hummed with the tension of clandestine operations, each action a calculated step in the grand dance of revolution. Meanwhile, British agents had begun to stir. Reports of unusual activity reached the ears of loyalists and military officers alike. Strange ships docked at odd hours, suspicious messengers roamed the streets, and intelligence hinted that an important package had reached Philadelphia. Captain James Harlow, a sharp-eyed officer with a reputation for relentless pursuit, was assigned to investigate. Harlow moved quickly, gathering spies and informants, determined to uncover the truth behind the mysterious dossier. Back in the safe house, Abigail Thorne briefed Elias and Cray. "We've done everything to protect the dossier," she said, her voice steady, but eyes betraying the worry beneath. "But the British will move quickly. They always do. We need to anticipate their next steps." Elias nodded. "What can I do?" "You stay alert," Cray said, "and ready to move at a moment's notice. This isn't just about the papers anymore. It's about our lives and the lives of everyone connected to this cause. As night fell over Philadelphia, shadows lengthened across the cobblestone streets. Couriers moved swiftly, hooded figures slipped through alleys, and the faintest sound of horse hooves on distant roads sent shivers through those attuned to danger. Every whisper carried potential secrets, every shadow a hidden threat. Elias could feel the weight of the city's tension pressing down on him. The dossier, once a simple collection of papers, had become a symbol of defiance, a spark for revolution, and a target for the empire. Outside, the British tightened their surveillance. Captain Harlow's men prowled the docks, questioned sailors, and intercepted messengers wherever they could. The clock was ticking, and the Sons of Liberty had to stay one step ahead. Elias realized that the battle for freedom was no longer fought merely with muskets and cannons. Intelligence, secrecy, and courage in the face of omnipresent danger were just as vital. Every decision mattered, and every misstep could lead to disaster. The city of Philadelphia slept fitfully, unaware that the future of the colonies and the fate of the daring young apprentice from Boston hung in a delicate balance between whispers and shadows.
The first confrontation. Tension gripped the safe house as dawn approached. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper outside the windows made Elias and the others jump. Abigail Thorne and Silas Cray had been coordinating the courier routes all night, ensuring that no one would suspect the dossier's movements. Suddenly, a sharp knock rattled the front door. Elias's pulse raced. "Code?" Abigail asked, her hand hovering near a hidden pistol. "Sunrise," Cray replied, signaling that the warning system was triggered. The British had discovered the courier network's vulnerability. Without hesitation, Abigail ushered Elias and a small group through a concealed door at the back of the house. They descended a narrow staircase into a hidden tunnel that led toward the river. Cray handed Elias a satchel containing the most sensitive portion of the dossier. "Keep this close," he whispered. "If anything happens, you must ensure it reaches Congress." The group moved cautiously through the tunnel, emerging near the banks of the Delaware River. The morning fog clung thickly to the water's surface, masking their movements. Rowboats, prearranged by loyal allies, waited silently. As they loaded the cargo into the first boat, the sound of soldiers' boots echoed through the streets above them. Captain James Harlow and his men had tracked the network to the safe house. Elias took a deep breath. The river was their only chance. "Row!" Cray commanded, and the boats pushed into the mist. Shots rang out from the streets behind them, the British attempting to halt their escape. Arrows of panic and determination flew as Elias gripped the oars, pulling with every ounce of strength. The rowboats cut silently through the fog, moving downstream toward safer ground. One of the pursuers appeared along the riverbank, musket raised. Cray, quick thinking, threw a small fire pot into the water, creating a sudden splash and momentary smoke. The soldier flinched, giving the boots a crucial moments of distance. Elias's arms ached, and the cold bit at his hands, but he rowed relentlessly. The fate of the dossier, and perhaps the revolution itself, depended on their success. After nearly an hour, the boats reached a secluded landing. Friends and sympathizers were waiting, taking the cargo quickly into hiding and providing fresh clothing and food for the weary couriers. Elias finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. His body was exhausted, but his mind raced with the enormity of the events. The British were aware of the network, and the dossier's safety was only temporary. Every step from now on would require vigilance, cunning, and courage. Cray placed a reassuring hand on Elias's shoulder. "You did well, apprentice. Few could have held under such pressure. But remember, this is only the beginning. The real battle is not just to protect the papers, but to protect the very idea of freedom they represent." Elias nodded, staring at the foggy river.
The currents carried not only the boats, but the hopes of a fledgling nation, moving inexorably toward a future shaped by the brave acts of those willing to risk everything for liberty.
Safe haven. After navigating the treacherous waters of the Delaware River, Elias and the group reached a secluded estate owned by a sympathizer of the Revolution. Hidden among dense woods and surrounded by high stone walls, the estate provided the perfect sanctuary for the dossier. The group unloaded the cargo swiftly, moving it into a hidden chamber behind a false wall. The room was dry, secure, and stocked with provisions to ensure the documents could remain safe for weeks if necessary. Elias set the satchel down, still trembling from the tension of the river escape. Cray handed him a warm blanket and a cup of steaming tea. "You did well," Cray said. Few could maintain composure under that kind of pressure. Elias nodded, though exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. He realized that his journey from a simple apprentice in Boston to a courier of vital revolutionary secrets had changed him irrevocably. Abigail Thorne appeared, holding a parchment addressed to the leaders of the Continental Congress. "Now comes the most critical part," she said. "The dossier must be reviewed and distributed to ensure it reaches the right people without compromise." Inside the chamber, Elias watched as the leaders meticulously examined the documents. Every letter, every stamp, every forged or intercepted communication was analyzed, cataloged, and prepared for secure dissemination. The room hummed with quiet intensity, the weight of history pressing on every shoulder. Samuel Adams spoke first. "This information proves beyond doubt the lengths the Crown has gone to deceive and control us. If the colonies act on this, we can finally unite fully and strategically." Abigail nodded. "But the British will retaliate. We must move carefully, using the documents wisely, without revealing our sources." Elias felt the gravity of the moment. The papers he had carried through icy waters, under the threat of gunfire, and across hostile cities, were now in the hands of men who could shape the future of a nation. Cray looked at Elias. "The journey isn't over. Protecting this knowledge is now as vital as delivering it. You must remain vigilant, for both our enemies and our allies could pose threats." Elias absorbed the words, feeling the full weight of responsibility. The safe house had become more than a refuge. It was a command center, a hub of intelligence, and a symbol of the revolution's resilience. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the distant echoes of Boston, the rivers of Philadelphia, and the unfolding struggle for liberty. Elias realized that every choice, every act of courage, was part of a larger story, one that history might one day tell, but only if those willing to risk everything remained steadfast in their cause.
Shadows of retaliation. Word of the dossier's existence had begun to leak despite the careful measures taken by the revolutionaries. British intelligence, furious at being outmaneuvered, ramped up efforts to identify and punish those responsible. Captain James Harlow was relentless, dispatching spies and loyalist informants across Pennsylvania and New Jersey in a desperate attempt to recover the stolen documents. Elias awoke to the sound of hoofs in the distance. The estate, normally peaceful in the early morning hours, now seemed tense and foreboding. Abigail Thorne and Silas Cray were already awake, reviewing messages delivered by trusted couriers. Each note contained fragments of intelligence about British troop movements and new surveillance efforts. "Captain Harlow is closing in," Abigail said grimly. "We need to move before he identifies this safe house." Elias rose quickly, gathering the essentials he had come to rely on: the satchel containing the most sensitive documents, a change of clothes,
and a small supply of provisions. Every moment now was precious, and hesitation could mean capture, or worse. Cray handed Elias a map marked with alternative routes and safe houses stretching across the colonies. You'll travel with a small group. The goal is to keep the dossier moving, away from any prying eyes. The British will try to intercept it, but if we remain one step ahead, the information will reach Congress intact. The group departed before dawn, slipping through the woods and avoiding main roads. Every rustle of leaves, every distant noise sent shivers down their spines. They moved silently, communicating with hand signals, aware that discovery at this stage could compromise the entire revolutionary effort. As the day wore on, news from Philadelphia arrived. Some of the leading figures were preparing to disperse the key documents strategically to Allied colonies. Elias understood his importance in his role, not just in delivering the papers, but in ensuring the chain of secrecy remained unbroken. That night, as they camped in a secluded grove, Elias reflected on the journey so far, from Boston's ink-stained print shop to the treacherous harbor missions, and now to the dangerous roads leading away from Philadelphia. Each step had been fraught with risk, but each step had brought them closer to the vision of a united resistance against tyranny. Abigail's voice cut through his thoughts. "We'll rest here for a few hours. After that, we move again." Elias nodded, eyes scanning the dark horizon. The revolution was no longer a distant idea. It was alive, dangerous, and urgent. The British were relentless, but so too were those who believed in liberty. In the quiet of the grove, Elias understood that the true test was only beginning. The path ahead would demand courage, cunning, and unwavering resolve, and the decisions made in the shadows of retaliation could very well determine the future of the colonies themselves.
Across the colonies, Elias and his small team began a series of perilous journeys, moving the dossier through Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. Each colony presented new challenges: tightened British patrols, loyalist informants, and unpredictable terrain. The road was long, and every encounter could have revealed the revolutionary secret they carried. Traveling mostly at night, the group relied on safe houses, secret signals, and the assistance of local sympathizers. Elias became adept at reading subtle cues: a lantern hung at a certain angle, a mark on a fence post, or a particular pattern of knocks, all signals indicating whether a route was safe or compromised. At each stop, Abigail Thorne and Silas Cray coordinated with Elias, ensuring that the documents reached trusted intermediaries. The correspondence detailed British interception of letters, forged communications, and the Crown's attempts to sow distrust among the colonies. This intelligence was invaluable, and its safe delivery became a mission of utmost urgency. In one memorable encounter, a British patrol blocked the main road to a safe house. Elias and the team, aware of the danger, diverted into the dense woods. For hours they navigated by the stars and the faint light of the moon, moving silently to avoid detection. By dawn, they emerged at a hidden path known only to loyalists sympathetic to the revolutionary cause. Each delivery required caution. In Philadelphia, they worked with Samuel Adams and John Dickinson. In New Jersey, they coordinated with local militia leaders. In New York, Allies prepared to relay information further north. Every step had to be precise, as a single misstep could alert the British and compromise months of planning. Elias grew into his role, transforming from an apprentice into a seasoned operative. He understood that the revolution was not fought solely with muskets and cannons. It required intelligence, secrecy, and strategic coordination. Each act of courage and careful decision ensured that the dossier and the truths it contained moved steadily toward Congress. Throughout the journey, Elias kept meticulous notes, memorizing codes, routes, and key contacts. This knowledge would become invaluable not only for the immediate mission, but for the broader struggle, as networks of trusted revolutionaries needed to remain connected and resilient against British interference. By the time they reached the northernmost colonies on their route, Elias understood the enormity of the mission. They had traversed hundreds of miles, facing danger at every turn, yet the dossier remained intact. Its safe delivery was more than a victory. It was a testament to the courage, intelligence, and unwavering dedication of those who believed in freedom.
The final delivery to Congress. The long road through the colonies had tested every ounce of strength Elias possessed. But now, standing at the threshold of the Continental Congress in York, Pennsylvania, where Congress had temporarily relocated for safety, he felt the full weight of history pressing upon him. The sun was sinking low, casting a warm amber glow over the rustic wooden buildings. Modest though they were, they housed the leaders shaping the destiny of a rising nation. Abigail and Cray walked beside Elias, each step quiet, precise, and intentional. They moved through side alleys and narrow lanes, avoiding the more crowded streets where British sympathizers could be lurking. Upon entering the Congress building, the trio was escorted to a private chamber. Inside, several leading figures stood waiting, among them John Hancock, John Adams, and Benjamin Harrison. Their expressions were tense, yet hopeful. Samuel Adams stepped forward. "You three have crossed more danger than most soldiers do in a lifetime. If the information you carry is as vital as we've been told, tonight may change the course of this war." Elias set the leather satchel on the table. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was not from hesitation, but reverence. Cray broke the seal and spread the documents across the table. Maps of British positions, intercepted letters from royal officers, plans for troop movements, and evidence of clandestine efforts to divide the colonies all lay exposed. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. John Adams examined a letter bearing General Howe's signature. "If this is authentic, and I have no doubt that it is, this reveals intentions we suspected but could not prove." Hancock leaned forward. This is leverage. With this knowledge, we can anticipate every significant move they make." Abigail stepped closer to the table. "But you must use this information with care. If the British discover how much we know, they'll tighten their grip and seek out our sources with ruthless efficiency." Elias watched the leaders exchange ideas, each suggestion shaping strategies that would ripple across the colonies. He felt a swell of pride. He had not fired a musket nor commanded troops, yet his efforts had carried knowledge that might turn the tide. John Hancock finally turned to Elias. "Young man, tell me, what compelled you to risk your life for this?" Elias swallowed hard. Because the truth deserves to be carried. Because freedom deserves a chance." A quiet, thoughtful silence followed. "That," Hancock said, "is the heart of a patriot." The room shifted back into motion as strategies were drafted, messengers assigned, and plans refined. Congress would use the information to predict British maneuvers, strengthen vulnerable routes, and rally hesitant colonies. Cray pulled Elias aside.
"The mission is not over," he said softly. "This information gives us power, but power attracts danger. The British will not rest until they uncover how these papers slipped through their fingers." Elias nodded. Though exhausted, he understood the delivery marked the end of one chapter, but also the beginning of another, one filled with deeper intrigue, greater risks, and decisions that could sway the revolution. As the night deepened, the chamber glowed with candlelight, illuminating the documents that had nearly been lost to the dark waters of the Delaware, the muskets of British patrols, and the shadows of traitors. Elias stepped outside for a breath of cool air. The stars above shimmered, reflecting the fragile hope of a young nation. And in that moment, he understood that the fight for freedom was not just on battlefields. It lived in secrets, in courage, and in the hearts of those willing to carry truth through the darkness.
The hunter strikes back. Captain James Harlow stood in the dim interior of a commandeered tavern on the outskirts of New Brunswick. Rain hammered against the windows as a small fire crackled behind him, throwing long shadows across the room. Before him stood a trembling loyalist courier, mud splattered on his boots, eyes darting nervously. "So," Harlow said, his voice cold as steel, "you're telling me the dossier slipped through Philadelphia entirely?" "Yes, sir," the courier stammered. "Rumors say Congress already has it, that they're using it, planning against your movements." Harlow's jaw clenched. For weeks he'd chased shadows, abandoned safe houses, empty barns, misleading trails left by rebels who were always one step ahead. But now he had something. He knew the information was in Congress's hands. "And the couriers?" Harlow asked. The courier swallowed. "They say a young rebel, an apprentice turned messenger, played a part, led them through the woods, saved the papers." At that, Harlow's expression sharpened. He remembered the boy from Boston, the apprentice who had eluded him in the harbor, the one with the quick eyes and steady hands. Elias. "He's the thread," Harlow murmured. "Pull the thread, unravel the whole tapestry." He dismissed the courier and turned toward the fire, watching the flames lick upward. If Congress possessed the documents, the Crown needed a countermeasure, and fast. They needed to break the courier network, cripple the colonies' ability to communicate, and make an example of those responsible. A new order. Days later, a formal directive arrived from General Ho himself. Locate and destroy the courier network, capture the ringleaders alive if possible, and find the boy. Armed with new authority, Harlow expanded his operations. He deployed scouts along known sympathetic towns, bribed informants, and planted double agents within taverns frequented by rebels. A web began to form across New Jersey and Pennsylvania, one designed to trap Elias and anyone associated with him. Harlow's spies soon delivered their first success, a coded message intercepted near Trenton. Only part of it could be translated, but it mentioned a relay meeting near the Delaware crossing. "That's where they'll move next," Harlow said. "We'll cut them off before they reach the river." Elias feels the tension shift. Back in York, Elias sensed a new intensity in the air. Extra guards were posted around Congress. Couriers arrived breathless, reporting suspicious movements along the main roads. Abigail Torn reviewed each report with her sharp, analytical mind. "Something's changed," she said. "The British are tightening a net somewhere. It feels coordinated." Cray nodded grimly. "This is retaliation. Harlow is no fool. He knows we can't afford to lose momentum now." Elias felt the unease rising inside him. For the first time since leaving Boston, he wasn't running toward danger. Danger was coming for him. That night,
Thunder rumbled across the sky as Elias scanned maps by candlelight. New courier routes needed to be established, new codes created, every acorn carved with a secret message, every scrap of intelligence tucked beneath a loose floorboard, every whisper in the night carried risk. Abigail Torn approached quietly. "We'll need you again, Elias. Congress wants to send updated intelligence to the militias near Valley Forge, and we need someone fast, someone invisible." Elias looked up, and Harlow, "As close as ever," she admitted, "which is why we must move quickly." Elias nodded, feeling the familiar fire rise in his chest. He had survived the river, the gunfire, the endless roads. He would not falter now. The net tightens. By dawn, Elias and a small escort rode north. Fog blanketed the road, muffling the sound of hooves. The packet Elias carried contained Congress's latest strategies, troop estimates, supply shortages, and coded signals for militia coordination. What Elias didn't know was that Harlow was waiting.
Valley Forge, winter of fire and hunger. Snow fell in thin, ghost-like sheets as Elias staggered southward through the forest. The ambush at King's Crossroads still burned fresh in his mind. The screams, the gunfire, Abigail's fall, Marcus's injured body, and his own inability. But grief was a luxury he could no longer afford. Not when Captain Harlow was still alive. Not when the mission still wasn't over. Marcus limped heavily beside him, blood dried and dark around his bandages. Cray walked ahead, eyes scanning the woods for British patrols. Silence wrapped the forest, broken only by distant crows. Hours passed. Then, finally, the trees parted, revealing a vast, frozen valley. Cray whispered, "Welcome to Valley Forge." A frozen graveyard of patriots. Elias expected an army. He found something closer to a field of ghosts. Rows of crude huts stretched across the valley floor. Thin smoke drifted from their chimneys. Soldiers moved like shadows, footprints in snow stained with blood from their own frostbitten feet. Some sat huddled around pits dug into the frozen ground. Some wrapped rags where boots should have been. Some stared blankly ahead, hollow from hunger. Marcus stopped, unable to process the sight. "My God, this is the Continental Army?" Cray nodded grimly. "This is what holding a revolution looks like." Elias felt the weight of the packet inside his coat. Information, the kind that could save all these men, or doom them all if Harlow got to him first. Washington's tent. They were led through rows of dying fires and starving men until they reached a tall canvas tent reinforced with logs. 2 sentries stood outside, muskets trembling from the cold. Inside, General George Washington stood over a map-strewn table, his face lit by a single lantern. His uniform was neat, but his eyes carried the exhaustion of a man keeping a dying army alive by will alone. He looked up. Cray saluted. "General, we made it." Washington's gaze shifted to Elias. "And this must be our courier, Mr. Finch." Elias stiffened. "Sir." "Come," Washington said. "Show me what you carried through hell." Elias stepped forward and placed the packet on the table. Washington opened it carefully. His eyes moved across the codes, diagrams, British troop movements, and intercepted orders. When he finished reading, he exhaled slowly, like he'd been underwater for months. "This information," Washington murmured, "may be the reason this army survives the winter." He looked up at Elias. "How many did you lose?" Elias swallowed. 2. Washington bowed his head. The Republic will remember their sacrifice. For the first time since Abigail fell, Elias felt the pressure on his chest loosen, just a little. The warning. Suddenly, the tent flap burst open. A young officer stumbled inside, cheeks red from the cold. "General, British scouts spotted on the northern ridge. They're moving south, tracking a small party." Everyone froze. Marcus muttered, "Harlow! He followed us!" Washington straightened. "If the British discover this encampment while we're this weak—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Valley Forge would fall. Washington issued rapid orders. Strengthen the ridge patrols. Move the wounded huts further south. No fires after nightfall. And double the picket lines. The officer ran off. Washington turned to Elias again. "You brought danger to us, but also the tool we need to survive it." He pointed to a map pinned to the back wall. "Here," Washington said, tapping a red mark north of Philadelphia, "is a supply depot the British consider secret. If we strike it, we starve their winter force and cripple their spring campaign." Cray frowned. "That depot is a fortress." Washington nodded. "Exactly. Why I need you three." Elias felt his pulse quicken. He wasn't done. His mission wasn't finished. Washington stepped closer. "You've survived Harlow's traps. You've crossed enemy lines, and you've delivered intelligence no other man could carry." He paused. "Now I need you to help destroy that depot." Elias didn't hesitate. "I'll go." Cray nodded in approval. Marcus took a weak breath. "Then I'm going too. Abigail didn't die so we could hide behind a hill." Washington's expression hardened, respect mixed with sorrow. "You leave at dawn, and God go with you." Elias stepped out of the tent into the freezing wind. Around him, half an army struggled to stay alive. Somewhere in the dark forest above them, Harlow's men searched, methodical and relentless. Elias tightened his coat. His grief became fire. His fear became purpose. Tomorrow, the war continued, and this time, Elias would bring the fight to them.
Into the lion's winter den. The sun never truly rose the next morning. It merely seeped weakly through the gray clouds, like a dying candle behind a frost-colored veil. Elias tightened his worn coat and stepped out of the crude hut Washington's men had given them for the night. Marcus already sat outside, sharpening his knife, jaw clenched against the pain in his ribs. Cray inspected his musket with slow, practiced care. "Ready?" Cray asked. Elias nodded. He wasn't ready. Not for another mission. Not after Abigail. But readiness wasn't a requirement anymore. Survival was. The valley stretched behind them. Hundreds of starving soldiers bundled in rags, forming weak lines for thin rations. Smoke drifted like ghosts through the air, a reminder of everything at stake. Cray led the way into the trees. The mission briefing. They met Washington scout, Lieutenant Emery, at a snow-covered ridge. Emery handed Elias a rough sketch drawn in charcoal. "That's the British Winter Depot, hidden north of Philadelphia in an old stone mill. They've reinforced it with wooden barricades, 18 soldiers inside at all times, and a rotating patrol of 6. Marcus frowned. 6 isn't much. Emery shook his head. "No, but the real problem is this." He pointed to the side of the sketch. "A signal tower. If they spot you, they'll light the beacon, and then 2 companies from Philadelphia will ride out within minutes." Elias felt a chill that wasn't from the frost. Cray folded the map.
We destroy the supplies and leave no time for a signal. Exactly, Emery said. But there's something else. He hesitated. Harlow's been seen near the depot. He's tightening his perimeter. Marcus cursed under his breath. Elias didn't speak. He simply felt the familiar burn in his chest. Harlow, still following him like a shadow carved from steel and fury, into the woods. They moved through the forest in silence, boots crunching over ice-crusted snow. Ravens circled overhead. The world felt abandoned, stripped to bone by winter. Hours passed. At dusk, they reached a ridge overlooking an old stone mill, its roof patched with new timbers, a wooden stockade surrounding it. Oil barrels, gunpowder crates, stacks of blankets and salted meat. The lifeblood of the British winter campaign, Marcus whispered. If we take this out, they'll bleed. Cray scanned the patrols. 2 men every 15 minutes. There's a blind spot on the east wall. That's our entry. Elias inhaled slowly. This was the point where fear usually tried to grab hold of him. Not tonight. Not after Abigail. Not after seeing Valley Forge on the brink of death. He nodded to Cray. I'll go first. The silent kill. Darkness thickened over the depot as Elias crept down the ridge, sliding between boulders, staying low in the shadows. The snowy ground muffled footsteps. A British sentry paced near the east wall, humming a tune under his breath. Elias waited, counted his steps, measured the rhythm. When the sentry turned, Elias lunged, one arm locking around the man's throat, the other hand covering his mouth. A brief struggle, a muffled gasp, stillness. Elias dragged the body behind a snowbank. Marcus whispered, "Clean." Cray nodded. "Move." Inside the depot. They slipped through a loose plank in the stockade. Inside, lanterns lit the yard with flickering light. British soldiers talked near a fire, unaware of the assassins inches from their shadows. Cray pointed to the mill's lower level. Gunpowder stores are in the cellar. We take those out, the whole depot goes up. Marcus produced a small wrapped bundle. Washington's men had provided 3 crude but powerful powder charges. Fuse is 6 seconds. No mistakes, Marcus whispered. Elias moved first again, hugging the shadows along the mill wall. He pressed his back to the cold stone and listened. 2 guards inside. Footsteps. Laughter. Then a voice. One Elias recognized instantly. Captain Harlow. The hunters return. Search every wagon, Harlow barked. Finch is alive and I want him found. Elias froze. Cray's hand gripped his shoulder, steadying him. Marcus watched, eyes wide with fear and fury. Harlow continued, footsteps tapping across the wooden floor above them. He'll come for this depot. I can feel it. Marcus whispered. He's right. Cray pressed his finger to his lips. Stay focused. But Elias couldn't ignore the storm brewing in his chest. Harlow. So close he could hear his breath. The man who killed Abigail. The man who hunted him like an animal. And now he had the chance to strike back. But the mission came first. If they failed, Valley Forge would starve. He forced himself to move. The powder room. They found the cellar door unguarded. Inside, British powder stacked to the ceiling. Barrels of oil, bundles of musket cartridges. Cray whispered, Once these go, the whole valley will see it." Elias nodded. "Then let's be gone before the sky lights up." Marcus lit the fuse. The three men sprinted for the eastern wall, just as a door slammed open above them. Harlow's voice roared across the yard. "There, by the wall! That's Finch!" Flames spit from muskets. Snow exploded around Elias's boots. The chase had begun. The race against the fire. They ran for the stockade, bullets snapping past their heads. Elias dove through the loose plank, rolled and sprinted for the tree line. Behind them, boom! A thunderous explosion ripped the night apart. Flames burst from the mill in a towering column, painted orange against the dark sky. British soldiers screamed. Flames consumed barrels, crates, the signal tower, everything. Cray shouted, "Go! Keep running!" They sprinted into the forest, branches whipping their faces. But over the crackling inferno, one sound followed them. Harlow's voice. Raging, relentless, close. "Finch, I'll find you!" Elias didn't look back. His lungs burned, his heart hammered, and he knew this wasn't over. Not even close. But tonight, they had struck a blow the entire revolution would feel. Tomorrow, Harlow would come.
The winter hunt. The fire from the destroyed British depot still painted the night sky a violent orange, long after Elias, Cray, and Marcus fled into the woods. Snowflakes drifted down, glowing briefly as they passed through the rising embers, silent witnesses to a war fought in shadows. But the silence did not last. Behind them, echoing through the valley like the howl of a furious wolf. "Find them! Fan out!" Captain Harlow's command. Boots pounded the frozen ground. Branches snapped. Dogs barked. 2, maybe 3. Marcus muttered, "Damn it, he's got tracking hounds." Cray didn't break stride. "We need distance, fast." Elias ran with everything he had, lungs burning from smoke and cold, legs screaming beneath him. But he didn't slow, not while Harlow was alive, not while Abigail's voice still echoed in his mind like a half-remembered prayer. Through the frozen pines. The forest thickened as the trio plunged deeper into the night. Pines sagged under the weight of ice, the air sharp enough to cut skin. The snow grew deeper, threatening to drag them down. Marcus stumbled. Elias grabbed his arm and pulled him upright. "You all right?" Marcus nodded through gritted teeth. "My ribs, but I can run." Behind them, the hounds barked again, closer than before. Cray cursed under his breath. "They're picking up our tracks. We need a diversion." They reached a small clearing where a frozen creek shimmered under the moonlight. Cray pointed. "Marcus, follow the creek. The water will mask your scent. Elias and I will split off to the ridge." Marcus hesitated. "What about the dogs?" Cray handed him a small pouch of pepper and gunpowder mix, an old native trick he'd learned. "Throw this down when you reach the bend. It'll blind their noses." Marcus nodded once, fiercely. Then they split. A hunter's fury. On the opposite ridge, Captain Harlow emerged from the trees, his breath fogging around the edges of his cold smile. "He sees them," he said, kneeling. "Tracks. 3, and fresh." One of his sergeants pointed. "They split, sir." Harlow's jaw tightened. "Finch is with the northern trail." "How do you know?" the sergeant asked. Harlow's jaw tightened. "Because I know the boy, and because he knows me." He gestured toward the ridge. Take the dogs north. Kill the others if you must, but Finch stays alive." The hounds were released. 3 muscular beasts bred for war, noses pressed to the ground, claws scraping against frost. Then Harlow followed them with a soldier's steady, deadly determination. A race above the ravine. Elias and Cray sprinted along the narrow ridge as the forest dropped into a jagged ravine below. The moonlight danced across the ice-slicked rocks. Elias whispered, "He's close. I can feel it." Cray didn't argue. "Harlow isn't chasing us. He's chasing you. Don't forget that." Elias tightened his jaw. "I haven't." They reached a fallen tree bridging the ravine, just wide enough for one person at a time. Cray motioned, "Go." Elias stepped onto the slick bark, balancing carefully. Halfway across, he heard twigs snap behind him, the unmistakable rhythm of pursuit. Hounds, snarling, charging. Cray lifted his musket. "Move, Elias!" Elias jumped from the log just as the first hound leapt after him. Cray fired, the roar of the musket echoing through the forest. The bullet struck the hound mid-air. It yelped and tumbled into the ravine below. The second hound lunged for Cray. Cray swung the musket like a club, smashing its skull with a sickening crack. But the third hound, the largest, barreled straight into Cray's legs. Cray and the beast tumbled dangerously close to the ravine's edge. "Cray!" Elias shouted. He sprinted back toward the fallen tree, just as Cray pushed the hound off him and drove a knife into its throat. The beast collapsed, twitching. Cray staggered to his feet, breath ragged. "I'm fine, go!" But before they could move, a musket shot rang out. Snow erupted at Elias's feet. Then a voice, cold and furious, rolled across the ravine. Harlow appeared. Captain James Harlow stepped from the trees, pistol in hand, coat whipping behind him like a shadow stitched from night itself. His eyes locked on Elias. "You," he said, voice trembling with rage. "You destroyed my depot." Elias stared back, chest heaving. "You killed Abigail." Harlow's face hardened into stone. "Then come here, boy, and I will let your death reunite you with her." Cray raised his musket, aiming at Harlow. Harlow fired first. Cray collapsed with a cry, clutching his shoulder as blood seeped through his coat. "Cray!" Elias shouted. Harlow began to reload, expression calm, practiced. Elias didn't think. He ran. The leap. Elias sprinted toward the end of the ridge. Harlow fired again, the shot grazing Elias's coat. No time left. Nowhere to run, except forward. Elias hurled himself off the ridge, into the frozen darkness of the ravine below. Wind roared past his ears. Branches whipped his arms. Then, splash! Icy water swallowed him whole. His body screamed from the cold, but he kicked upward, gasping for air. Above him, Harlow's furious voice echoed across the cliffs. "Finch, you can't run forever!" Elias didn't answer. He let the freezing river carry him away, deeper into the wilderness, toward survival or death, whichever reached him first.
The River of Shadows. The river carried Elias through a labyrinth of ice and dark water. His body screamed from the cold, muscles burning with every kick, teeth chattering so violently it felt as if the frost was gnawing on his skull. The sound of Harlow's furious voice still echoed behind the cliffs, but it grew fainter with each twisting bend of the river. Branches tore at his coat, slicing his arms.
Snow-laden rocks scraped his legs, but the icy current refused to let him sink completely. Somewhere ahead, the river narrowed, funneling him toward a shadowed bend. Elias's mind fought the chaos of pain and fear. Survival demanded focus. Every heartbeat, every breath, every stroke mattered. Shadows in the trees. Above the river, British scouts combed the ridge. Harlow had sent them. Their torches glinted through the trees, and the faint sound of barking dogs reminded Elias that the hunt was far from over. He slowed, letting the current pull him under a low-hanging branch. Mud and debris snagged his coat. Holding his breath, he drifted beneath the shadows, invisible to eyes above. The scouts paused, then continued downstream, their voices fading. Elias allowed himself a small, trembling sigh. The river was his only ally now. The frozen shore. Minutes, or maybe hours later, Elias stumbled onto a narrow, snow-packed bank. The ground was hard, unforgiving, and his legs buckled beneath him. He collapsed against a tree, shivering violently. His coat was soaked, ice clinging to the fabric, but he was alive. He pulled the packet closer to his chest, feeling its reassuring weight. It had survived every trap, every ambush. It couldn't be lost now. Not after Abigail. Not after Cray and Marcus. Blood dripped from a gash on his shoulder. Harlow's bullet had grazed him, and pain shot down his arm with every movement. He bit back a groan and forced himself upright. Survival demanded action, not despair. A silent ally. From the woods came a faint sound, soft footsteps on snow. Elias froze, straining to see through the darkness. A figure emerged, an elderly man wrapped in furs, carrying a lantern. His eyes were sharp and his movements deliberate. "You're far from anywhere safe, boy. Come, you won't last another hour in this cold." Elias didn't trust strangers easily, but instinct told him this man was no enemy. He nodded, stumbling toward the figure who guided him through hidden paths in the forest. By the time Elias reached a small cabin hidden in the trees, he was nearly hypothermic. Inside, a fire burned weakly, and the warmth was a shocking relief to his frozen body. The man introduced himself as Silas Whitmore, a loyalist turned rebel sympathizer who had helped many couriers survive the wilderness. Healing and reflection. Silas helped Elias strip his wet clothes, wrapping him in blankets. Hot broth warmed his stomach, and slowly the numbness ebbed. "You're lucky to be alive," Silas said, studying him carefully. "Harlow's men will be looking for you all night, and tomorrow they'll bring reinforcements." I nodded, still catching my breath. I can't let him stop me. Not now. Not after everything." Silas regarded him for a long moment. "Then you need a plan. You're not just running. You're delivering hope. That packet, it could save thousands if it reaches Washington safely." Elias's gaze fell on the small satchel. The firelight reflected off the brass clasps. It had survived every ambush, every river, every storm. It had to reach Valley Forge. Outside, the forest whispered under the wind and snow. Somewhere, Harlow's voice was still calling through the trees, still hunting him, still relentless. But Elias was no longer just running. He was planning. He was surviving. And the revolution depended on him.
The hidden passage. The morning fog clung to the forest like a shroud. Elias sat inside Silas Whitmore's cabin, wrapped in layers of furs and blankets, his teeth still chattering from the icy river. Cray and Marcus were gone. Marcus had insisted on following a secondary route to avoid Harlow's patrols, while Cray had taken the ridge paths to lure any tracking parties away. Elias was alone now, the packet safe, and every muscle in his body screaming from exhaustion. Silas watched him quietly. "You won't last long if you try moving too soon, but if you stay here, Harlow will sweep the woods before nightfall. You need a path, a hidden one." Elias nodded. "I need to reach Valley Forge, deliver the packet. Nothing else matters." Silas pointed to a map etched on old parchment. "There's an old passage used by rebels and loyalists alike. It runs through a series of caves and hollowed tree roots. You can reach the ridge above the Delaware unnoticed, but it's narrow, treacherous, and you must travel only at night." Elias's jaw tightened. "Then that's where I go, tonight." Into the shadowed path. As darkness fell, Elias slipped quietly from the cabin. The forest was silent now, save for the occasional crack of ice beneath his boots. The hidden passage began at the base of an ancient oak, its hollow trunk large enough to conceal a man. Inside, the air was damp, earthy, and smelled of centuries-old roots. He moved carefully, every step calculated, listening for the faintest sounds of pursuit. Harlow's men could be anywhere, their senses sharpened by desperation and orders from their merciless captain. The passage twisted and narrowed. Roots scraped his arms. Stalactites dripped water from the low ceilings. At times he had to crawl on his stomach to pass through tight spaces. Every movement threatened to create noise. Every echo could betray his position. Hours passed, and the darkness pressed against him like a living thing. Exhaustion gnawed at his mind. His thoughts flickered to Abigail, to Cray, to Marcus. They had sacrificed so much, and he could not fail now. The trap of silence. Suddenly, a faint scrape echoed ahead. Elias froze. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. Someone or something was inside the passage with him. "Who's there?" he whispered, gripping the satchel closer. No answer. The scrape came again, closer this time. A shadow shifted on the cave wall. Elias realized the passage widened into a small cavern. He crouched behind a rock, breath shallow. Then a low growl. A hound, or worse, a British scout trailing him. Elias's mind raced. He recalled a trick Cray had taught him: throw an object to distract. He grabbed a loose stone, hurled it into the opposite corner. The growl snapped toward the noise, and Elias slipped past, heart pounding, sweat freezing on his brow. Emergence to the ridge. At last the hidden passage opened onto a high ridge above the Delaware River. The river was a silver ribbon in the moonlight, far below, moving silently past ice-strewn banks. Valley Forge lay beyond, still, frozen and desperate. Elias paused to catch his breath. The hidden passage had kept him safe, but the journey was far from over. Below he could see the faint flicker of British lanterns, Harlow's men searching in vain. Their shadows danced over the snow. He gripped the satchel tightly. Every life at Valley Forge depended on him now. He had lost comrades, survived ambushes, and escaped Harlow's relentless pursuit. But the final stretch, the last dangerous miles to the Continental Army, lay ahead. Elias took a deep breath. His teeth chattered, his muscles screamed, but his resolve burned hotter than any winter fire. "Almost there. I will not fail," he whispered to himself. Above, the moon rose, casting a pale light on the path ahead. He adjusted the satchel and began his descent toward the river.
knowing that Harlow's shadow still lingered, waiting.
The final confrontation. The snow lay thick on the ridge above the Delaware, muffling Elias's boots as he descended toward Valley Forge. The bitter wind cut through his soaked coat, and every step ached with exhaustion. But he was close, so close he could almost smell the campfires of the Continental Army, smoke curling into the pale moonlight. And then he heard it, the crunch of boots behind him. Harlow. Elias froze, heart hammering. He knew the sound, every deliberate step, every sharp exhale, every signal that death was approaching. Harlow had tracked him through the wilderness, through rivers and hidden passages, and now he was here. "Finch!" Harlow's voice roared across the ridge, carrying over the wind. "You've run long enough." Elias clenched his hand around the satchel. This was it, the moment he had been running toward for weeks, through rivers, ambushes, and the endless chase. He could not falter now. The clash. Harlow emerged from the trees, pistol in hand, redcoat flashing in the pale moonlight. His eyes burned with fury and obsession. "You destroyed my depot. You killed Abigail. And now you will pay." Elias tightened his jaw. "I will not let you stop me. Not now. Not ever." Harlow fired, the shot ringing across the snow. Elias dove to the side, bullets slicing the air around him. He rolled behind a boulder, panting, muscles trembling. The fight became a deadly dance. Elias darted between trees and rocks, keeping the satchel close. Harlow followed relentlessly, gun raised, eyes fixed. Every misstep could be the last. Then Elias saw an opening, a frozen creek below, thin ice stretching across it. He remembered Cray's lessons, remembered the rivers, the hidden passages, and the risk and courage it had taken to survive this long. He feinted left. Harlow lunged, and Elias slipped down toward the ice. Harlow followed, gun ready, but the slope was slick. Elias drew a deep breath and kicked a loose rock. Harlow stumbled. The leap of faith. Elias sprinted across the ice. It creaked dangerously. Behind him, Harlow recovered and fired again. The bullet struck the snow mere inches from Elias's shoulder. He didn't stop. Not now. He hurled himself across the river, landing in a snowbank on the far side. The cold bit through his coat, but he scrambled to his feet and ran toward the lights of Valley Forge. Harlow reached the bank moments later, frozen rage twisting his face. Elias turned and faced him, chest heaving, the satchel held tightly in both hands. "You think you can outrun me forever?" Harlow shouted. Elias didn't answer with words. He charged. Using the momentum of the snowbank, he tackled Harlow, sending both of them sliding across the icy ground. The struggle was brutal. Fists, boots, and blood mingled with snow. But Elias had something Harlow didn't. Desperation, righteous fury, and the will to survive not just for himself, but for an entire army. With a final push, Elias drove Harlow against a tree, disarming him. Harlow gasped, rage burning in his eyes, but Elias didn't wait. He ran toward the camp. The arrival. Elias burst into Valley Forge, the satchel clutched tightly. Soldiers and officers looked up, startled by the sudden figure appearing from the woods. "Elias Finch, what news?" one officer shouted. Elias sank to his knees, catching his breath. "The depot, destroyed. Harlow's hunting me, but the packet, it's here, safe. Take it to Washington." Officers hurried to secure the documents. Cries of relief spread through the camp as the men realized the intelligence could save their winter quarters, supplies, and lives. Elias leaned against a tree, snow falling around him, lungs burning. He had survived ambushes, frozen rivers, relentless pursuit, and the personal loss of comrades. He had delivered the knowledge that could change the tide of the revolution. Somewhere behind the ridge, Harlow's rage lingered, but Elias didn't look back. Not now, not ever. For now, the mission was complete. The fight for freedom was still ahead, but the first, hardest victory had been won.
A nation's hope. The sun rose over Valley Forge, casting a pale light on frost-covered tents and weary soldiers. Elias Finch stood among them, the satchel finally empty, but the weight of its journey still heavy on his shoulders. He had survived the rivers, the forests, and the relentless pursuit of Harlow. Now he watched as the Continental Army prepared for the winter, their spirits lifted by the intelligence he had delivered. Cray limped over, a grim smile breaking across his face.
You did it, Elias. You actually did it.
Elias shook his head, exhaustion and relief mixing.
We did it. All of us.
He glanced toward the ridge where Harlow had vanished, knowing the British officer's obsession wouldn't die easily. But for the moment, Harlow was far away, and the mission was complete. The weight of sacrifice. Elias walked through the camp, noting the soldiers' faces. Some were young men who had joined the fight with dreams of glory. Others were veterans hardened by years of battle. All were here, surviving a harsh winter, strengthened by the knowledge that their leaders now had the intelligence to act wisely. An officer approached him, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes. "Elias Finch, your courage has saved countless lives. Washington himself will want to hear of your deeds." Elias nodded silently, knowing that the work of freedom was rarely rewarded with recognition. Survival, victory, and the hope of independence were reward enough. A letter for the future. Later that evening, Elias found a quiet spot near the edge of the camp. He pulled a piece of parchment from his coat and began to write. Not orders, not messages for Congress, but a letter for the future. He wrote of the courage of those who had fought unseen battles, of the sacrifices made in forests, rivers, and hidden paths. He wrote of Abigail, Cray, and Marcus, of the young couriers whose lives had been risked so that knowledge could move faster than muskets. Elias realized then that the revolution was not just a fight of armies and generals. It was the struggle of ordinary people driven by extraordinary courage. And their story, written or unwritten, would become the foundation of a nation. The dawn of a nation. As dawn broke over the snow-covered encampment, Elias looked out across the Delaware River. The ice glinted in the first light, and the wind carried the faint cries of soldiers preparing for the day's duties. He had seen death, danger, and despair, but he had also seen courage, hope, and resilience. The knowledge he had carried, the risks he had taken, had shifted the course of history in ways he could barely comprehend. Elias tightened his coat, the chill biting less sharply now than before. He had survived the hunt, the ambushes, and Harlow's obsession. He had delivered the truth, and in doing so, he had helped a nation stand a little taller, dream a little bigger. The war would continue, danger would persist, but hope, fragile, fierce, and unyielding, had taken root. Elias Finch stepped forward, ready to continue the fight, knowing that freedom once glimpsed was never truly lost. And somewhere, in the distance, the echo of muskets and the whispers of patriots carried a promise, a nation forged from courage, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of liberty.